the Sea of Galilee. At dawn did not smell of hope. It smelled of stagnant water, rotting kelp, and the bitter, metallic tang of exhaustion. Simon sat slumped against the rough wood of the hull, his chest heaving, his hands, calloused and scarred from years of battling the ropes, were raw. He picked at a piece of green slime caught in the mesh of his net, a net that was humiliatingly, devastatingly empty. For 12 hours. He and his brother Andrew had waged war against the dark water. They had rowed until their shoulders screamed. They had cast into the shallows. They had cast into the deep. They had begged the God of their fathers for a catch. The water had given them nothing. Now, the sun was bleeding over the Golan Heights, illuminating their failure for the whole town of Capernaum to see. Other boats were coming in, heavy with silver tilapia, the men shouting greetings, counting coins in their heads. Simon kept his eyes on the floorboards. He felt the weight of the other fishermen's stares, the pity, the quiet judgment. Simon, the loudmouth. Simon, who thinks he leads the harbor, but cannot feed his own house. He began to wash the nets, scrubbing them with a violence that frightened the younger men nearby. He wasn't just cleaning tools, he was trying to scrub away the shame. Then, the crowd shifted. The chatter in the harbor died down, replaced by a hush that rippled outward like a wave. He was there. Jesus of Nazareth walked along the shoreline. The dust of the road seemed to settle before it dared touch his sandals. He was surrounded by a crushing mob, people hungry for a word, a touch, a miracle. But Jesus didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the boats. He looked at Simon. He stepped onto Simon's boat, an invasion of space that felt both terrifying and inevitable. The boat dipped under his weight. "Put out into the deep," the rabbi said. His voice was not loud, yet it cut through the noise of the harbor like a knife. "And let down your nets for a catch." Simon froze. A vein pulsed in his temple. The audacity. This man was a carpenter, a builder of tables and yokes. What did he know of the currents? What did he know of the way fish hid from the morning sun? Simon stood up, wiping his wet hands on his tunic. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to shout. "We are professionals. We know this lake better than we know our wives." "Master," Simon rasped, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "We have toiled all night. We have taken nothing." He paused, looking at the tired faces of his crew. James and John were watching him. The crowd was watching him. But Simon looked into the eyes of the carpenter. They were not mocking. They were waiting. They held an authority that made the wind seem hesitant. "At your word, I will let down the net." It was a toss of resignation, not faith. They rowed out. The silence on the water was heavy. Simon threw the weighted net. It hit the surface with a splash and sank. He waited for the familiar nothingness. Instead, the boat shuddered. It wasn't a tug. It was a collision. The ropes screamed as they went taut, burning through Simon's palms. The water around the boat began to boil. A silver explosion of life breached the surface hundreds. Thousands of fish, thrashing in a chaotic dance. "Help!" Andrew screamed. "The net is tearing!" The hull groaned, tipping dangerously close to the waterline. Water poured in. Simon scrambled, shouting for the other boat. James and John rowed furiously, their eyes wide with panic. They hauled the nets in, fish spilling over their ankles, their knees, filling the vessel until it sat mere inches above the drowning point. It was impossible. It was physics defied. It was economics shattered. But as the fish slapped against his legs, covering him in slime and scales. Simon did not cheer, and did not. The adrenaline drained out of him, replaced by a cold, trembling terror. He looked at the catch, a fortune that could pay off debts for a year. Then he looked at the man sitting calmly amidst the chaos. The gap between them was suddenly infinite. Simon saw the power, but more than that, he saw the purity. In the blinding light of this miracle, Simon saw his own darkness, his pride, his anger, his secret doubts, his smallness. He felt filthy. He felt like a disease standing next to a cure. He didn't bow. He collapsed. He fell to his knees among the wet, writhing fish, grasping the hem of Jesus' robe with trembling fingers. "Depart from me," Simon sobbed, his voice breaking into a guttural cry that shocked the others. "Go away from me, Lord." He squeezed his eyes shut, unable to bear the gaze of the Holy One. "For I am a sinful man." It was the most honest thing he had ever said. He expected a rebuke. He expected to be struck down or cast aside. Instead, a hand rested on his head. It was firm, grounding him to the earth. "Do not be afraid," Jesus whispered. The command entered Simon's chest, calming the storm in his blood. "From now on, you will be catching men." Simon looked up. The fear was still there, but it was changing into something else, something dangerous, something consuming. He didn't know where this road would lead. He didn't know it would lead to a cross of his own. He only knew that the nets, the boat, and the fish didn't matter anymore. He stood up, left the greatest catch of his life rotting in the sun, and followed. The night was not just dark. It was violent. The wind howled down from the Golan Heights, turning the Sea of Galilee into a churning cauldron of black ink. The disciples were alone. Jesus had stayed behind on the mountain to pray, sending them ahead into the teeth of the gale. Simon gripped the tiller, his knuckles white. The boat was a toy in the hands of a furious giant. Every wave that smashed over the bow brought with it the cold, stinging taste of death. They had been rowing for hours, muscles burning, lungs screaming, yet the shoreline of Capernaum seemed no closer. "We are going to die here," Thomas shouted over the roar of the wind, bailing water with a frantic rhythm. "He sent us out here to die!" Simon wanted to rebuke him, but the doubt was already rising in his own throat like bile. Why, he thought, why send us away? Does he not know the storm? Does he not care? Then, in the fourth watch of the night, that ghostly hour, when the spirit is weakest, they saw it, shape, a silhouette walking on the ridges of the waves as if they were solid granite. Terror, primal and suffocating, seized the boat. It was a phantom, a spirit of the abyss coming to claim them. The men, hardened fishermen who laughed at storms, screamed like children. It is a ghost, but the wind carried a voice back to them. It was not the shriek of a demon. It was calm, cutting through the chaos with terrifying authority. "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." The recognition hit Simon like a physical blow. It was him. The master was treating the storm like a paved road. In that moment, something wild ignited in Simon's chest. A madness, a desperate need to bridge the gap between his small, frightened humanity and that divine power. He didn't want to just watch the miracle. He wanted to be inside it. He stood up, the boat rocking violently beneath him. "Lord," Simon bellowed into the gale, "if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." The other disciples stared at him in horror. He is mad. The storm has taken his mind. Jesus stopped. He stood atop a rolling crest, his robe whipping in the wind. He extended a hand. Come. One word. An invitation to the impossible. Simon didn't think. If he thought, he would stay in the boat. He swung his leg over the gunwale. His bare foot touched the water. It should have been cold liquid. It should have swallowed him. Instead, it felt solid, like wet marble. He stepped out. Then the other foot. He was standing on the surface of the deep for 3 heartbeats. Simon Peter was more than a man. He walked. He took a step toward the light of the Master's face, and the laws of nature bowed before his faith. He felt a surge of exhilaration so potent it felt like wine. I am doing it. I am like him. But then, a wave crashed to his left. The wind tore at his tunic. Simon looked away from Jesus. He looked at the storm, gravity, which had been suspended. Suddenly remembered him. The reality of his situation crashed in. I am a man of dust. I do not belong here. The solid floor beneath him vanished. The water turned back into water. He sank like a stone. The cold darkness engulfed him instantly. Water filled his nose, his mouth, choking his scream. The chaos of the underwater world spun him around. He flailed, clawing at the liquid nothingness. The abyss was pulling him down, claiming the imposter who dared to walk above his station. I am dying. I am lost. His hand broke the surface, a desperate claw reaching for the sky. Lord, save me. It was a gurgle, a pathetic plea, but the grip that caught him was iron. Jesus was there. He didn't struggle with the water. He stood upon it. He hauled Simon up with an effortless heave, pulling him from the grave. Simon gasped, coughing up water, clinging to Jesus' arm, shivering violently. They stood there. Amidst the heaving waves, the God-man and the drowning fisherman. Jesus looked into Simon's terrified eyes. There was no anger, only a sadness, a disappointment that cut deeper than the cold. "O you of little faith," Jesus whispered, the wind carrying the words straight to Simon's soul. Why did you doubt? Why Simon didn't have an answer. He only knew that for a moment he had flown, and because he looked at the danger instead of the Savior, he had fallen. They climbed back into the boat. The wind ceased instantly. The lake became glass. Simon sat in the stern, wrapped in a blanket, shivering. He looked at his hands. They were the hands of a coward. He had walked on water. And yet, he felt smaller than he ever had on dry land. They marched north, leaving the familiar shores of Galilee for the pagan high country of Caesarea Philippi. Here, the air was different, thinner, sharper. Massive cliffs of red rock loomed over them, carved with niches holding statues of foreign gods Pan, the goat man, Zeus, the thunderer. It was a place where the earth gaped open, a cavern the locals called the Gates of Hades. Jesus stopped in the shadow of these stone idols. He looked small against the cliff face, yet he commanded the space with a silence that made the pagan shrines feel hollow. He turned to the 12, wiping the dust from his face. "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" The disciples murmured, kicking at the dirt. It was a safe question. They offered safe answers. "John the Baptist," said Andrew. "Elijah," ventured Thomas. "Jeremiah," suggested another. Jesus nodded, listening to the rumors of the crowd. Then, his eyes locked onto them. The playful teacher vanished, the judge appeared. "But you?" he asked, the question hanging in the hot air like a blade. "Who do you say I am?" Silence. The wind whistled through the canyon. To answer was to risk everything. If he was just a man, they were fools. If he was God, they were unworthy. Simon felt a pressure in his chest. a rising tide of heat that had nothing to do with his own thoughts. It wasn't logic. It wasn't a guess. It was a detonation of truth in his gut. He stepped forward, his voice trembling not with fear, but with awe. "You are the Christ," Simon whispered, the words echoing off the canyon walls. "The Son of the living God." Jesus smiled. It was a smile of radiant approval, a look that healed every scar of failure in Simon's heart. "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah," Jesus declared, his voice ringing out. "For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." He stepped closer, placing a hand on Simon's shoulder. The grip was heavy, like a knighting. "And I tell you, you are Peter, Petros, the rock. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Simon stood taller. The imposter in his head finally shut up. He wasn't just a fisherman anymore. He was the rock. He held the keys. He was the second in command. Pride, sweet and intoxicating, rushed into his veins. He looked at the others, and for the first time, he felt superior. "I am the foundation." But the moment of glory was brief. Jesus sat down on a stone, his expression darkening. He began to speak of the future, but not a future of thrones and crowns. He spoke of Jerusalem, of elders and chief priests, of suffering, of killing. The Son of Man must suffer many things and be killed. No, the word rang in Peter's mind. This didn't fit. He had just been handed the keys to a kingdom, not a funeral procession. Messiahs don't die. They conquer. If Jesus died, then Peter's new title meant nothing. Peter did something unthinkable. He grabbed Jesus by the arm of the living God, and pulled him aside. He dragged the Master into the shadows, his face flushed with the arrogance of his new authority. "God forbid, Lord," Peter hissed, his voice low and urgent. "This shall never happen to you. I will not let it." He thought he was being loyal. He thought he was being a protector. He thought, foolishly, that having the keys meant he could tell the king which door to open. Jesus spun around. The warmth was gone. The smile was obliterated in his eyes. Peter saw a flash of something terrifying, the same power that had calmed the storm, now directed at him. Jesus didn't look at Peter. He looked through him, at a shadow standing just behind his shoulder. "Get behind me, Satan!" The word struck Peter like a physical slap. The disciples gasped. "You are a stumbling block to me," Jesus said, his voice trembling with the intensity of the spiritual battle. "For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Stumbling block. In the span of 5 minutes, Simon had gone from the rock of the church to a stone meant to trip the Messiah, from the holder of keys to the mouthpiece of the devil. Jesus turned and walked away, back toward the road to Jerusalem, leaving Peter standing alone in the dust. The other disciples passed him, eyes averted, terrified. Peter stood frozen. The heat of the sun felt cold now. The keys he thought he held suddenly felt incredibly heavy. He realized, with a sinking dread, that he didn't understand anything. He knew who Jesus was, but he had no idea what Jesus had come to do. He followed, trailing behind, the taste of ashes in his mouth. He was still the rock. But now he knew rocks can be used to build, and rocks can be used to crush. Jerusalem was a powder keg, and the upper room was the fuse. Outside, the city swelled with Passover pilgrims, the air thick with the smoke of roasting lambs and the murmur of rebellion. inside. The air was heavy with something far more dangerous farewell. Simon Peter sat near the table, his muscles coiled tight. He watched Jesus. The master had been strange all evening, melancholy, distant, speaking in riddles about bodies and blood. The other disciples ate the unleavened bread with nervous glances. But Peter could not swallow. He felt the phantom weight of the sword hidden beneath his cloak. If they come for him, Peter vowed silently, I will be the wall they break against. Then, Jesus stood up. He did not raise a goblet to toast a victory. He stripped off his outer robe, the seamless garment of a teacher. He stood before them in his tunic, looking suddenly frail. He wrapped a coarse linen towel around his waist, the uniform of a slave. He poured water into a copper basin. The sound of the splashing water was deafening in the silent room. One by one, the King of Kings knelt. He took the dirty, calloused, manure-stained feet of his followers into his hands and washed them. Peter watched, horrified. His stomach churned. This was wrong. This was an inversion of the universe. Kings do not scrub filth. Messiahs do not touch the ground. When Jesus came to him, Peter pulled his feet back, tucking them under the bench. He looked at Jesus with a mix of panic and indignation. Lord, Peter stammered, his face flushing hot. Do you wash my feet? Jesus looked up from the floor. The lamplight danced in his eyes, revealing a tired tenderness. What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. No. Peter's voice rose, harsh and brittle. He was not being rebellious. He was trying to protect Jesus' dignity. He was trying to keep the hierarchy intact. You shall never wash my feet. Jesus paused. He let the water drip from his fingers back into the basin. If I do not wash you, Jesus said softly, you have no share with me. The threat pierced Peter's heart. No share, to be cut off. That was a death worse than crucifixion. Peter's pendulum swung wildly to the other extreme. If water was the connection, he wanted to drown in it. Lord, Peter gasped, thrusting his hands and head forward. Not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Wash all of me. Jesus smiled sadly. He who has bathed does not need to wash, except for his feet. He finished the task. He dried Peter's feet with the towel. Peter looked down at his clean skin, feeling a strange shame. He had wanted to fight for Jesus, but Jesus only wanted to serve him. It was a language Peter did not yet speak. They returned to the table. The night deepened. Judas, the treasurer, had slipped out into the dark like a thief, leaving a void that felt like a cold draft. Jesus spoke again. Where I am going, you cannot come. Panic seized Peter. Going, was he leaving them? Was he retreating? Lord, why can I not follow you now? Peter stood up, knocking his wine cup over. Red wine stained the white tablecloth like a spreading wound. He needed to prove himself. He needed to erase the memory of being called Satan at Caesarea Philippi. I will lay down my life for you, Peter declared. He meant it. Every fiber of his being screamed it. He imagined dying in a blaze of glory, sword in hand, defending the Master. That was a death he understood. Jesus looked at him. The gaze was unbearable. It wasn't the look of a general assessing a soldier. It was the look of a doctor diagnosing a terminal patient. Will you lay down your life for me? Jesus asked. The question hung in the air, stripping Peter of his armor. Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. The room went dead silent. The other disciples stared at the table. Peter felt as if he had been punched in the gut, denied me the rock. He looked at John, at James. Did they believe this? Even if I must die with you, Peter whispered, his voice shaking with the intensity of his denial. I will not deny you. He gripped the hilt of his sword under the table until his knuckles turned white. You are wrong, Lord, he thought, a desperate defiance rising in his throat. I will prove you wrong. I am not a coward. He did not know that the enemy coming for him was not a Roman legion. It was a servant girl. It was a charcoal fire. It was his own survival instinct. Jesus stood up. Rise, let us go hence. They walked out into the cool night, toward the Garden of Gethsemane. Peter marched right behind him, eyes darting at every shadow, ready to kill, completely unprepared to die. The Garden of Gethsemane was behind them, left in a wake of torches and trampled grass. The sword, Peter's foolish, violent attempt to force God's hand had been sheathed, but his hands were still shaking. He had swung to kill, but only taken an ear. Jesus had healed the wound, rebuked the violence, and surrendered. Now, Peter was doing the one thing he promised he would never do. He was following from a distance. He shadowed the mob through the winding streets of Jerusalem, slipping into the black alleys whenever a torch swept his way. He wasn't a brave man anymore. He was a ghost, haunting the edges of a tragedy he couldn't stop. He arrived at the courtyard of Caiaphas, the high priest. The heavy wooden gate swallowed the procession. Peter lingered outside, heart hammering against his ribs. Through the influence of John, he slipped past the gatekeeper and entered the belly of the beast. The courtyard was a theater of shadows. In the center burned a fire of coals, a charcoal fire. The night air bit through Peter's tunic. The cold in Jerusalem was different from the cold on the sea. It was dry, seeping into the marrow. He was drawn to the orange glow of the embers. He needed warmth. He needed to stop shivering, lest someone see his fear. He stepped into the circle of light. Soldiers were there, servants, the very people who had dragged his master away. Peter extended his hands toward the flames, rubbing them together. Just blend in, he told himself. Just survive the night. Wait for the morning. A servant girl, young and sharp-eyed, paused as she poured water for the guards. The firelight caught the side of Peter's face. She squinted, tilting her head. You also were with Jesus the Galilean, she said. It wasn't an accusation of a crime. It was a casual observation. Peter's blood froze. Every eye around the fire shifted to him. The warmth of the coals vanished. I do not know what you mean, Peter said quickly. Turning his face away from the light, he feigned annoyance, waving her off like a fly. He moved toward the gateway, seeking the shadows of the porch. She is mistaken. Just a girl. It means nothing. But the seed was planted. An hour passed. The sounds from inside the high priest's house grew louder, muffled shouts, the sickening sound of a strike against flesh. Peter stood in the darkness, straining to hear. Was he speaking? Was he fighting back? This man was with Jesus of Nazareth. Another girl pointed him out to the bystanders near the gate. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Peter's chest. The circle was closing. I do not know the man, Peter snapped, his voice rising. He added an oath, swearing by the temple, trying to sound like a pious Judean, not a follower of a radical. I swear it. He retreated back toward the fire. Nowhere was safe. The shadows held eyes. The light held exposure. Then, a man stepped forward. He was older, his face hard. He was a kinsman of Malchus, the servant whose ear Peter had sliced off in the garden. He looked at Peter, not with suspicion, but with recognition. "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" the man demanded, stepping closer. "Your accent betrays you. You are a Galilean." The trap snapped shut. They knew, if he admitted it now, the cross waiting for Jesus would have a twin next to it. The survival instinct, that lizard brain drive to breathe, took over the rock. "I do not know this man of whom you speak," Peter shouted, his voice cracking, cursing and swearing. "May God strike me if I lie. I do not know him." The words hung in the air, violent and absolute. He had disowned his soul to save his skin, and in the silence that followed his shout, a sound cut through the pre-dawn mist. A rooster crowed, loud, piercing, mundane. Time stopped. At that exact moment, the doors to the high priest's house opened. Guards were leading Jesus across the courtyard to the holding cell. He was bruised. His lip was split. His hands were bound. As the rooster's cry faded, Jesus stopped. He turned his head. He didn't look at the soldiers. He didn't look at the fire. He looked straight across the courtyard, through the smoke, into Peter's eyes. There was no anger in that gaze. No, "I told you so." It was a look of infinite, crushing sadness. It was the look of a friend who sees you breaking and cannot reach out to hold you. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." The memory of the prophecy crashed down on Peter like a collapsing building. The boast, the sword, the washing of feet, the promise to die. All of it lay in ruins at his feet. He wasn't the rock. He was sand. He was dust. Peter covered his mouth, a strangled noise escaping his throat. He turned and ran. He scrambled out of the gate, stumbling blindly into the streets of Jerusalem. He ran until his lungs burned, until he found a dark, stone alleyway where no one could see him. And there, the strongest of the disciples, the leader of the 12, collapsed against a wall and wept bitterly. Not silent tears, but the heaving, ugly sobs of a man who has murdered his own heart. The tomb was empty. The women had sung of angels. The rumors of resurrection had flown through Jerusalem like wildfire. Peter had seen the linen wrappings himself, lying flat on the stone slab. But seeing an empty grave is not the same as seeing a forgiven heart. Peter had fled Jerusalem. He returned to the only place that made sense, Galilee. He went back to the boats, back to the nets, back to the smell of fish guts and salt. If he couldn't be a disciple, if he had disqualified himself by his cowardice, at least he could be a fisherman. "I am going fishing," he had told them. It was a statement of resignation. I am going back to who I was before he found me. 6 others followed him. They rowed out into the dark. And just like that first morning years ago, the sea mocked them. They caught nothing. The silence of the night was filled only with the rhythm of their failure. Dawn broke, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gray. A figure stood on the shoreline, a silhouette against the rising mist. "Children," the voice called out, carrying over the water. "Do you have any fish?" "No," they shouted back, irritated. "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." Peter froze. His hands stopped moving on the oars. The air suddenly felt charged, heavy with memory. The déjà vu hit him like a physical blow. The empty night, the morning stranger, the command to cast. He watched the net hit the water. He watched the ropes go taut. He watched the water boil with the frenzy of a massive catch. 153 large fish. The net held. But Peter's heart tore open. "It is the Lord," John whispered, his voice trembling. Peter didn't wait. He didn't care about the fish. He didn't care about the boat. He grabbed his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and wrapped it around his shame. He dove into the chilly water. He swam. He thrashed through the 100 yards of water, his lungs burning, his eyes fixed on the figure on the beach. He needed to get there. He needed to know if he was still welcome. He dragged himself onto the rocky shore, dripping, shivering, gasping for air. And then he smelled it. Smoke. Jesus was there. He was crouching over a small fire. A charcoal fire.
It is I.
Peter stopped dead. The scent triggered a violent flashback.
Not be afraid.
The courtyard. The servant girl. The denial. I do not know him. The last time Peter had stood by a charcoal fire, he had betrayed his best friend. Now, Jesus had built one for him. "Come and have breakfast," Jesus said. He was cooking fish and bread. He served them, breaking the bread with those hands that still bore the ragged, red holes of the nails. They ate in silence.
How could I?
No one dared to ask.
I truly do not know
"Who
the
are
man."
you?" They knew. The air was thick with a love that was terrifying in its intensity.
Everyone.
When they had finished, Jesus turned to Peter. He didn't look at the others. He isolated him. "Simon, son of John." Jesus used his old name, the name of the fisherman, not the rock. "Do you love me more than these?" He gestured to the boat, the nets, the fish, the safety of his old life.
Leave your nets.
Peter swallowed
There
hard.
is a greater purpose
"Yes,
waiting
Lord,
for you.
you know that I love you. Feed my lambs."
Save
Jesus
me.
waited. Then, a second time,
Save
"Simon,
me.
son of John, do you love me?"
I understand.
Peter's voice grew tighter.
Please
"Yes,
continue
Lord,
with your
you
second
know that I
question.
love you. Tend my sheep." Then, a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" The third time cut Peter to the bone.
Do you
3
love
questions. One for the first denial,
Do you love
one
me?
for the sworn oath, one for the curse. Jesus was surgically reopening the wound to drain the poison. Peter was grieved. He looked at the fire, then at the scars on Jesus' wrists. He realized that he couldn't hide his heart. Jesus knew the cowardice, and he knew the love buried beneath it. "Lord, you know everything," Peter whispered, tears mixing with the seawater on his face. "You know that I love you." Jesus looked at him. The restoration was complete, but the call was new. "Feed my sheep." Jesus stood up. He looked out at the horizon, where the sun was now fully risen. "Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted.
Peter,
But when you
come
are
follow
old,
me,
you
and
will
I
stretch
show
out your
you how to
hands,
fish for people.
and another will dress you and carry you
I'm
where you
coming,
do
Lord.
not want to go." Peter understood. He saw the shadow of a cross falling over his own future. Jesus was promising him that he would not die a coward. He would die a martyr. He would finally have the courage to follow where the Master had gone. Jesus turned back to him, eyes blazing with the morning light. "Follow me," and this time, Peter did not look back at the fish.